Here we go with another episode of Rethink Real Estate, and today we've got Lisa Copeland. Lisa is a fiery character, and I really enjoyed this interview, all the way from the story of her getting into the automotive sales industry just so that she had a cool car to drive because she rode off her car in college. Pretty cool story. But leading into them becoming one of the top 100 people, top 100 women in the automotive industry, leading the Women in Automotive board of directors, and then segueing a career into the real estate industry, now running and being part of one of the largest eXp teams in the world. This is a seriously cool story that goes into the depth of all different types of tenacity that is needed and mental set that is needed to make a change, but then also just to make sure that we blow away mediocrity. A great interview. I hope you get a lot out of it. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, Lisa, welcome to Rethink Real Estate.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you being part of our podcast at this point, because you come incredibly highly recommended. Because it's funny, whenever I get introduced to somebody new, I always go out to a great deal of the network of the people that have already spoken, and I ask them about. I'm like, hey, I've got Lisa on. Do you know who Lisa is? And I just shoot your name out there. And I got I don't know, probably about 15 responses to the network of people that have been on the podcast going, I know who she is. I know who she is.
Oh,
I've seen her on YouTube.
Oh,
Things like
good.
that. Yeah, that's
Yay.
right.
But I can tell you one place they haven't seen me probably is on TikTok. So there's that.
So there's a great little way to go into it. So you're not a big TikTok fan?
No. I mean, I think I had a social media guy for a while, and I think he chopped up some of my stuff and put it on TikTok. But I think I'm just too old to dance around houses, And Google is the number one platform for searches. So, yeah,
Very good.
YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, but not TikTok.
Well, hey, I think that there's a lot of people that share that philosophy with you, because it all gets a little bit confusing eventually. Like at the moment, they're talking about Threads, which is a new Twitter and all of this different stuff. But it seems to be that it's still a people business, and it's still something where you've got to be belly to belly and connecting with people, I guess. So
I guess, yes, I agree. More that than social, but I do a lot on social media, but I just kind of pushed back on the TikTok thing. But I've got a really large organization, and all my younger agents, they're on TikTok.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you see anything come from that though? Because the audience is so young, I don't know that they would be reaping a lot of benefit at this point. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, according to them, again, because I've not had any success on TikTok, but according to them, you're right. It is a younger audience. It's that like 21, 30, something like that. It's younger than 21, but like for home buyers. And so, that is where a lot of times they're going to search. Is on TikTok for their information versus on Google or on YouTube. And so, it's interesting. And so, I'm not downplaying the platform. It just isn't for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that YouTube, it feels to me like a more business-centric sort of way of doing it. Like maybe you've got some more professional people that you're targeting there. And again, I've seen a lot of your stuff on there as I've done a lot of research. And you've got a fascinating story as we segue into a little bit of that. I think that I think that there's a level of this that there's a couple of things that I certainly want to touch on today, and part of it is your story. But I think that from afar, looking from somebody that, Lisa, we've only just met each other on this podcast just a few minutes ago, and ultimately being an outsider looking in, I think that there's just been a great deal of consistency within your message that you've put out there that I think could be the real fundamentals for your success from my perspective if I was just looking in and didn't know you at all. But where did it all start?
Well, I mean, my success, I would just say that, my dad was an entrepreneur. So I watched him growing up, and he was fearless. Like, I grew up in Silicon Valley, and my dad was one of the guys who started one of the big high tech silicon or tape companies, like 8-track tape, cassette tape, whatever. And one of my favorite stories that my dad told me years ago, and I think this is where I kind of get my no guts, no glory thing, is that the labor unions had tried to come in. This was in the 70s. Labor unions had tried to come in and force him to unionize. And he was like, I'm not unionizing. My dad was not a union kind of guy. And he said, I'm not going to unionize my factories. And so, they threatened to everyone to walk out on him. And so he went and he mortgaged our home at 18% interest. Did not tell my mother. He said he had many sleepless nights, but that money is what was able to get him to get into negotiations with his employees so he would not have to unionize. And, it took a lot of courage. And, I think I'm an entrepreneur, whether I'm in real estate or I'm a car dealer, or whatever it is I am at this particular juncture in my life, or what juncture of my life I'm in. I think it takes courage to be an entrepreneur. And that's what I love about the real estate community is that we're not realtors. We are entrepreneurs. So.
Yeah, I think that there's a part of this in the sense that the entrepreneurial spirit within North America as a whole, and being more specifically to the US, definitely trickles down into real estate. It's funny, you quite often find that somebody in real estate has their finger in so many different little pies.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You have to, right? And real
Yep.
estate gives you the freedom to be able to do that.
Mm,
I'm able to have multiple streams of income, and some of them are not in real estate because
yeah.
it isn't like I'm sitting at the desk having to punch a clock from 9 to 5 to build somebody else's empire, right?
Yeah.
I get to
Yeah,
build
that's
my
right.
own, and I get to set my own hours. And that was what was so attractive to me about real estate. Was part of it was the freedom.
So, from the sales side of the business, where did you start your professional career in that sense? Not real estate, but where did it all start? What's your story chronologically?
Okay, so I was a fashion major in college, and I was selling skirts, and I was the number one salesperson at Contemporary Casuals. I was making $2.50, $3 an hour, and I got commission, which I was like in love with the commission. So then I was like, I'm going to go sell men's suits. So I went to a place in Dallas called Wolf Brothers. And that was the place to sell men's suits, and I got a job selling suits. And my commission was 2 to 3 times what my hourly wage would be.
Right.
And I was like, I like this commission thing. Well, as luck would have it, as any good fashion major, I was spending all my money on, and I was in Dallas, Texas in the 80s. So I was going out every night and I was spending my money on clothes, had to look good. And so I had forgotten to make the insurance payments on my car. Now, my mom and dad bought me a car, and my parents gave me money for car insurance and for my room and board and those kind of things. Well, I hadn't paid my insurance on my car because I was shopping, and I wrecked my car one day. And so I called, and it was totaled. And I called the insurance company. They're like, you haven't paid us in 3 months. So I called my dad, and I'm like, a little accident, need a new car. My dad's like, no, figure it out, kid. So that led me to the path into the automotive industry. Because back then, this was 1985, back then you got a free car for selling cars. It was called
Oh,
a demo.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
all car salespeople got a demo. So I got a job in the car business selling cars. I mean, if you can sell skirts, you can sell cars, like, right? I was at the number one domestic dealer in the nation called Jim Johnson Chevrolet. There was 90 salespeople, and I was the only female. And I was
Wow.
young, and I did not know what the heck I was doing, but I got a free car to drive. And as I got better and better in my sales career, I started to learn the value of I don't want a guarantee. I don't want a salary. I want to be on commission. I want to get paid on what I kill. So I spent several years in the car business, moved all the way up the ranks to general sales manager. Then I left the car business. I got married, or I'd been married, started having kids, and it wasn't very conducive to raising kids. So because I had a big finance background in the auto industry, I got into the mortgage business. I did, and that was in 1990. My son was born in 91. So 91, got in the mortgage business, 91, 92, did really well. And so I was like, I'm going to start my own mortgage company. So I did. And that company's still in business today. My husband runs it. So, and I ran it for about 12 years, 12 or
Yep.
13 years. We did very, very well. Um, and from there, I got bored again. There's something about me getting bored. And I had the opportunity to relaunch Fiat and Alfa Romeo to North America.
Oh, wow.
So I was the first dealer in North America. And there's more of a backstory to that. I was hired by a Chrysler dealer here in Central Texas to write the business plan for the launch, because back then the dealers had to compete to get this new point, this new Fiat point. And so I wrote a very compelling business argument, including opening the dealership in a high-end shopping mall.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I was like, well, it needs to be an experience. And so I really got behind this whole experiential shopping. And so once I wrote it, and Fiat, who was owned by Chrysler Corporation then, Fiat said it was the best proposal they'd ever seen. And not only were they going to give this dealer the point, but they were going to adopt this proposal. They wanted to buy it from us to launch the entire brand.
Right.
So at that point, I went to the guy that I wrote it for, and I said, I want to be the dealer principal. Like, this is my brand. I wrote the playbook for this brand to be relaunched to America. So I opened the first dealership in the country in Austin, Texas, in a high-end shopping center called The Domain. And it, housing Apple and Neiman Marcus and Tiffany's. And so it's very high-end, very boutique. 12 months later, Tesla follows suit. So just for the record, we were there first. Tesla came about 12 months later. That was in 2011. In 2012, my sales team, at that point, there was probably 149 retailers around the country. My team, almost all females and millennials, broke the world sales record.
Oh, great.
I'd made a bet that we would meet the chairman of Ferrari, Mr. Sergio Marchionne, if my team was able to accomplish that, and they did. And so I sold the dealership. We stayed number one in the country all the way through my ownership in 2016. I moved out to a $40 million facility that I built in more kind of on auto row, because at that point I had to bring Alfa Romeo in. I needed to open a service department. We needed to start a used car department. Like, at that point, we had to become a real car dealership. Well, with a real car dealership, I lost my passion. I had a passion and a purpose when I was there to revolutionize the auto industry by hiring women, minorities, and millennials and setting up an experiential shopping experience. But you lose the Zazazoo when you go out onto car row. Right. And so I had the opportunity to sell it in March of 16. So I did. And I wrote a book. I did a TV show. Kevin O'Leary's got a production company called Proper Television in Toronto. And so they recruited me. I don't know what the word is, but the show was called Car Sharks. And it was about 5 car dealers, me and 4 guys. 2 of them were American, 2 were Canadian, and myself. And so we filmed that in Toronto. Decided I did not want to be a reality television star. So then I really became a corporate speaker. I had an agent in New York and I stayed very, very busy speaking. I was doing, 26, 28 speaking gigs a year, Fortune 5, and Fortune 1, Fortune 5, Fortune 2, things like that. And I would be hired by the director of sales, the VP of sales, to help sales teams get unstuck.
Uh-huh.
So that was great. And I was just traveling all over the country doing what I do. And then this pandemic hits. I'm on a stage March 17th of 2020 in Chicago, and Atlas Van Lines was my client. That's who I was speaking for. They had their international conference. And I was the closing keynote speaker. I walk off stage and the meeting planner says, "We have a car waiting for you." And I was like, I got a standing ovation. Like, what happened here? Yeah. And I'm like, are you mad at me? Did I say something wrong? I mean, I was just like, oh God, because sometimes I can just say about anything. And I thought, oh. And she's like, no. She goes, Chicago's going to be shut down tomorrow. I go, what do you mean shut down? She's like, the coronavirus. I'm like, what is the coronavirus? Like, I live in Texas. There was nothing here yet. And even if it was, we did not believe it was coming.
Yep.
So anyways, and I was like, you are joking me. And so I'll tell you, the only time, Ben, that I was scared during the pandemic, the only time is when I got to Chicago O'Hare Airport that night, and everybody was like in hazmat suits, and I had nothing. They were in masks and gloves and hats, and like, oh my! I was like, I thought I'd walked into the zombie world.
Yeah, apocalypse. Yeah,
it was just ridiculous. And so, anyways, so I flew home, and then over the next couple of weeks, my agent just kept calling. We're canceled. They're moving the event to 2023. It was crazy. Like, I spent the first half of this year making up, because I was under contract with so many of these people, making up these events.
Right.
I was like, okay. So in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to be riddled in fear. I'm not locking myself in my house. I just thought it was ridiculous. So as fate would have it, my agent was also TV agent, was also the agent for Tarek El Moussa from HGTV.
Right.
And another guy by the name of Haas Pratt, who wrote the book, The Listing Boss. He's a professional speaker like myself. And I knew Haas. I'd been on his podcast in 2018. Anyways, long story short, they kind of pulled us all back together again. And Haas and Tarek said, we're going to build the largest real estate team in North America, and we need somebody to head it up. are you available? I'm like, well, I happen to be available. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I kind of pivoted. I did pivot. So I had to get my license. So well, I started at eXp June of
Uh-huh.
2020. So
Yep.
like June 5th is my anniversary date. I just saw that fact today. So I got my license really quickly. It's not hard to do. And I got my license and I started with Tarek and Haas, and we've just been going gangbusters.
So tell us about the production that you're doing at the moment and what the team looks like.
Yeah. So my personal production last year was 40 million.
Yeah.
That was mine, and my organization. That's not really my team, right? So I don't run a team of agents that report to me and I take splits, but I've got an organization. I've got a pretty impressive organization when I tell you who's in it. And my organization did 1.3 billion in 2022.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing how quick that feels. You saying you started basically at a
Yeah.
wreck in your car,
Yeah.
and now you're heading up one of the largest EXP. I'm assuming one of the largest EXP
Yeah.
organizations for the entire company.
Yeah. Not the largest, but I would say
One of.
we're probably in the top 20.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
reality. But hey, I mean, we've only been at it for 3 years, and so the ones that are beating us have been at it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So we feel really strong about it. And I'll tell you, one of the first people I called, and he was the first person I called when I made the decision. I was literally in Haas Pratt's office, and he said, "Hey, you know Grant Cardone, don't you?" I said,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, he's a good friend of mine from the car business."
Yeah.
And he said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could bring the Cardones in?" I'm like, "I think so." So I probably brought Elena Cardone in, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months later. With Grant, we actually called it Operation Moby Dick. And so, I had to bring Glenn Sanford in, our chairman of the board. Like, Grant is not an easy hook for sure. But it was just interesting that he said to me, he's like, "Can you believe no one's ever asked me about this before?" I go,
Right.
"They're scared of you." But like, why would I not talk to the guy who owns 12,000 doors?
Absolutely.
Who was a billionaire because of real estate. And
Yep.
what's funny, Grant and I go so far back that he used to call on me at my car dealership. He flew in on American Airlines, and he would come in and sell me training. So I knew
That's
him.
when you know you've made it, where you make a reference to somebody they used to fly commercial.
Well, I mean, I was his client. And
Yeah.
what's funny, so I'm not sure when this podcast will play, but Monday, 3 days ago, I just picked up Elena from Millionaire in San Antonio, and it's on my Facebook page. And I'm picking her up off the 650 Gulfstream
Yeah. Right.
with GC on the tail, and I'm just like, how far my friend has come. Which I love this story because I always liked him.
Yeah.
I mean, he and I are good. We're very good. We're like brothers and sisters. Like we're very good to bounce off of each other. So
You've got a certain energy about you, Lisa, that ultimately a lot of people would either be, they'd either be terrified or ultimately
I just
you would
say
be their
people either
absolute
love
best
me or
friend.
they hate me.
Yeah, yeah. I have the same thing. It's good,
Yeah.
but I guess that so through this story, there's a multitude of things that sort of come up. Then in all of this, there's a transition to real estate, which is great to speak to the audience that ultimately we're talking to at the moment. But realistically, the thing that I'm fascinated with is that I think that there is something to be said when you're the only woman in a 90 person sales team,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming that it was a pretty chauvinistic business
Oh,
at that point.
the best story, and people like it's hard to believe this story, but it's funny. I actually work. My husband today got me the job back then. He just graduated from college, and the work was just terrible in Dallas in the early or mid '80s. Economy was terrible, so he had to go sell cars. So he's the one who got me the job selling cars. So the guys did not want me there. Okay, because literally and I didn't know anything about selling cars. Like I was terrible. Like I almost lost my first sale because I told the guy that Nova had a full size spare. I didn't know, right? And so he's like, "You lied to me." And I'm like, "Oh, I just thought it did." Right? So millions of stories about that. But so I was there about 2 weeks, and I opened my desk drawer. God is my witness. And I opened it up, and there was a baby alligator. It was about this big, alive in my drawer.
Oh, geez,
Because
that's
yeah,
talk about hazing. That's
yeah,
an interesting.
the hazing was ridiculous. I mean, I mean, people would be fired and sued today if they would have lived through what I lived through in my early years as a car salesperson in the car business.
So tell me about this though. Like, what drove you? Was it just the complete tenacity to prove everybody wrong because they didn't want you there, or that ultimately that, or was it not about the others? It was just purely about the success element.
No, it was none of that. That's the crazy part. Like, I was not the driven person I am today. I just needed a car to drive. Right. And so I couldn't get a loan. I remember I went to a couple of banks and I was like, hey, I want to get a loan. And I make $3 an hour plus commission. And, and then I go to a bank. I'm a car salesman now on straight like I wouldn't get the loan. And my dad wanted to prove a point to me because he was so angry at me for not being responsible because they had given me the money to pay my car insurance. But I was, 20 years old and I'm shopping. I looked good for sure. I was a fashion major in Dallas, Texas in the 80s. You can only imagine. So, yeah, no, I could have cared less about proving anything to anybody. I just didn't want them to take my car away from me. Back then there was no buses in Dallas. There was no Uber.
Yeah.
I was not going to get to the club at night or anywhere else or to the mall or anything if I didn't have a car.
So what was the turning point when you knew that, hey, I've got this? Like, what was the turning point when you took it seriously? What was the turning point that drove you to the point of obviously being a pioneer within the industry, certainly within the space of...
I'm just a girl that needed a car, but yeah, probably after about a year, I really started climbing up this, because the sale, I figured out customers really liked me, right? Because I'm very authentic, and honestly, I didn't know how to be any other way.
Okay.
Because nobody taught me how to sell, because really nobody wanted me to make it. So nobody was like, oh, you should do this, or you should do that. So I would just tell people my story, and they'd walk in, I'd be in 4-inch heels, and they'd like, we want to work with her. And, of course, then the guys really hated me. And they'd be like, oh, and I'm like, no, I'm actually a fashion major. And people liked that. Like, I figured out early on, people don't want to be sold. People want to be involved in your storyline. They want to be part of your success. I'll never forget that I had a hairdresser, this guy, and his name was Kevin, and he ended up becoming my hairdresser. And he walked in, this is the 80s, Dallas, Texas. This is when the AIDS pandemic had kind of just surfaced, and it surfaced in Dallas.
Okay.
And I was a fashion major. So I went to a liberal arts college, and I went to school with a lot of these guys. This hairdresser comes in, his name was Kevin, and he has beautiful, long, frosted hair. And, and all the guys, we had to stand in a line to take ups. And all the guys in the dealership were like, ugh, you can have that guy, blah, blah, blah. He can't buy anything. Well, Kevin came in. Kevin owned one of the biggest salons in Dallas. Kevin came in and paid cash for a Corvette, paid full sticker. He said he had been in that dealership 7 times and nobody would talk to him. And I was like, oh, and of course he was like my people. I was like, oh, hey, Kevin, I love your hair. Oh my God, who does your hair? And so he and I became like the best of friends. He ended up doing my hair for years. But that being said, he was like, you never change who you are. He's like, and he would keep my cards on him. And he owned this huge salon in Dallas. He would keep my cards everywhere, all around his salon. And he told every person, all of his stylists in there, anybody talks about buying a car, you send them to Lisa.
Right.
And Kevin ended up becoming my biggest bird dog. I probably sold 5 to 10 cars a month because I was nice to that guy, who could buy anything he wanted to buy, by the way. And I treated him with respect.
So you sort of went with the tactic of disarming from the very beginning, and it wasn't really a tactic. It was just you being authentic in the sense of just disarming and just telling them the story. Hey, I'm not really here to sell cars. I actually am a fashion major. I'm just doing this so I can keep a car. Let me try and sell you something.
I literally tell people that. And you know what? They immediately went, phew. We're not going to get locked in the office with you. We're not going to get turned to 19 managers. You're not going to throw the keys to my trade on the roof. I'm like, no, hell no. I cannot lose my demo. So, and I had to sell, I think like 10 cars a month to keep my job, or all the salespeople did, or to keep your demo maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm on number 8 and I need 2 more this month so I can keep my car. And people were like, oh, don't you worry, sweetheart. We will buy this car and we're going to tell our friends to come buy cars from you. So I got to the point after a year, I was selling 40, 50 cars a month.
Wow. Geez.
I went from kind of the bottom of the board to the very top of the board. And then at that point, I was starting to make some real money. And the dealership upgraded my demo. They took me out of a Cavalier, and they put me in a Camaro, right? And the Camaro was for the top 10 on the board. So then at that point, I'm like, okay, if you can sell, you get the nicer car, you make a lot of money. And that means, and then I was able to upgrade my shopping budget.
At any point did it turn into you refining a skill set, or did that happen naturally, or
I think
what?
it
What do
happened
you
kind of
think?
naturally. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it happened naturally. And then I started to, obviously I wasn't the poor girl that I was a year before. So I started to refine the story, and I would tell people, hey, I am one of the top people here, and no pressure. And see, and do you see my Camaro? And our dealership was so big.
Mm.
It was in the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest dealership showroom. It's the size of 2 football fields. But we had lots.
Everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Everything's bigger in Texas.
There you
So
go.
we had lots all around the city. So how you'd get your customers to the lot is you'd put them in your demo. So I'd be like,
Oh.
versus sticking them in my Cavalier because I was a nobody, I'd be like, I have a Camaro.
So talk to me about the transition into real estate, because
Yep.
I think that it is absolutely fascinating what you've done in the car industry, and that you've been able to go through that. I will get to the point where I'm asking you about the CEO of Ferrari shortly, but realistically is that you've moved into the real estate game over the last number of years.
Hmm.
Where have you seen the parallels? Because if you think about it, real estate is one of the largest purchase that anyone will ever make / sell, one of the largest things they ever will have,
For sure.
from a financial commitment. But then also a car's pretty significant decision also
Yep.
when it comes down to decisions financially in life.
Hmm.
So obviously you're familiar with a big decision, but what are the parallels that you've seen and taken into the real estate industry from what you were doing in the car side of the business?
Oh, it's easy. I mean, we're not in the auto industry. We're not in the real estate industry. We're in the business. We're in the people business.
Right.
And, so I've never let that leave me, right? I always make the people the one thing, the main
Hmm.
thing. Number two, later in my automotive career, not in the very beginning, but I became very purpose driven, and I figured out very quickly that if you serve other people and if
Hmm.
you get them what they want, need, and desire, the money comes. So I was never money motivated. In the very beginning, I was just because I had to pay my bills. Like I was so broke. But as I got older and I did better, it was never about I never count my commissions. I mean, I had a 7-figure year, my second year in real estate. I'm like probably one of the only people at eXp that ever did that. Year 3, I did the same. Um, I've never ever put it on a sheet like, okay, I've got this much coming. I just let it roll, right? And
Okay.
at the end of the day, I never stop what I'm doing. I'm consistent. I'm authentic. I stay the course, and at the end of the month, the money ends up where it ends up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all I really care about is in real estate. It's the fact that I want to help my organization build generational wealth through real estate, and I want to help my clients build generational wealth. So I never take my eye off the ball. I always do. I always make sure what I'm doing is for the best of either somebody in my organization or the best for my client, and then the money comes.
So as it stands, you used to consult to pretty big companies in their sales divisions to get them unstuck. What is one of the most common threads or common things that you were unsticking people from?
Oh, mindset,
Okay.
million% mindset. Um, that, I mean, salespeople are notorious for shutting their own selves down, right? They're very self-sabotaging. The bosses made them mad. The sales quota got changed. The commission structure got changed. And all of a sudden now they're like, yeah, I'll just show them. I mean, so many times I would go in and, because typically I would speak and then they would hire me to do a consulting gig for 2 or 3 days afterwards. And to kind of like, the keynote is 80% entertainment, 20% content. And then you flip it when you go do the consulting gig, it's 80% content, 20% entertainment. So then I would really start drilling down on what was and why are they stuck? Why are their numbers stagnant? Why are they not breaking a world sales record? Right. And, so many times it was just their attitude when I would talk to these guys. They're like, oh yeah, I hate the boss. I hate the new pay plan. I hate the quotas. And I'm like, okay, so who is that really hurting at the end of the day? It is not hurting the company. It's hurting you because your income is doing this or this. So you either got to change your mindset. You've got to step out and make a fundamental decision that this is what you want to do and you're going to give it all you've got, or you need to leave.
Yeah.
Period.
And you see that parallel in real estate, obviously, as
Million
well as you
percent.
coach it. Yeah.
Million percent.
The difference is that the difference is it's funny in the real estate side of things is that if they can't blame a broker or they can't blame the organization, is that then they can only blame the person in the mirror that they stare at every morning. But still, realistically, there's just a lesser amount of accountability when you're not in a corporately based sales position, and that's where you see that lack of motivation sort of creep in. How do people stay accountable to themselves? How do they make that decision, Lisa? Because it's all good and well to say that in theory that, hey, they've got to make a decision that they really want to do it. But how does somebody, I gave somebody advice the other day within our own organization where they came to me and they said, hey, look, I'm sick of this roller coaster ride and whatever it is. And I'm like, well, hang on, your attitude's pretty much the same even when you're making money. I don't think that it's the up or down roller coaster. I actually think it's real estate in general that you don't like. And I don't think that regardless of whether you're making money or you're not, I think you'll still be unhappy within the industry. And you're not making a decision to be in the industry. You're making a decision to not like the industry and just think that that's your only option. Where does somebody, how do they draw the line and actually know that this isn't right for them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do a call every Thursday at 10 a.m. with my organization. And we all just got back from a big event in San Antonio, great event, big sales conference for our company. And, and I told them all, I said, think about the great ones, right? Like I've always had an executive coach. When I was a car dealer, I had one. It was a different one than I have today. But how do greats get great? How do professional athletes become professional? I mean, Tiger Woods would not be Tiger Woods if he did not have a swing coach, a mindset coach, a trainer, right? Like, you have got to have, you've got to have a coach. And I've told every one of them that, like, I'm not your coach. I'm not that's not my responsibility. You need to have a coach or an accountability a partner that you set targets. And you've got to have somebody, even if it's your spouse, like, I'm going to sell 2 houses this month. I'm going to sell 4 houses this month. I'm going to do something this month. And at the end of the month, you need to check in with that person. Did you hit your target? And if you didn't, why didn't you hit your target? You've got to be able to talk that through with somebody, or you will never be successful. There's nobody out there, in my opinion, that has been successful that has not had a coach at some point in their career.
Right. Right. So coach is an important part. How do you
100%.
again, do you think that I've seen people make a very softball decision when it comes to coaching, however, like where they don't pick somebody that is ultimately going to hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. It's basically based off the fact that they've just picked, like some people do pick their spouse because they know that their spouse isn't going to push them as hard as they ultimately need to. They're going to feel sorry for them and sort of give them the coddling that they need. When it comes down to picking somebody, is there any formula to picking somebody that you've had in the past?
1,000,000%. You only pick somebody that has been more successful than you, number one. Number two, whoever you pick, you want to make sure that you're not going to outpace them in the next 2 years. So I will tell you, so I had an executive coach who took 2 when I was in the car business. And what I needed him for is because I was put on the National Dealer Council, which is like the board at Chrysler. And I was the only woman. And I realized I was sitting at a table of 18 really powerful men that did not want me there. And so I wanted to really up my game, be able to up my strategy, not come off as defensive, not come off as weak, not come off as meek. Anyways, so I worked, I was on that board for 4 years. I worked with him, for 4 years. But in the beginning, he really got me ready because it's really easy to become defensive, right? If you feel like you're being ignored. So he really, really helped me with my skills that I still use to today. But and then in real estate, my coach is Grant Cardone. I pay him $25,000 a year.
Yep.
And why? Because he's really the only one who's more successful than me in the coaching business that I can see in real estate. He's a billionaire. He's got 12,000 doors. What do I want to be? A billionaire with 12,000 doors. Yeah. So why would I not pay the billionaire with 12,000 doors to coach me?
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair. So as we sort of creep towards the end of this podcast, I'm interested, when do you get bored of real estate?
That's a great question. So I don't know that I'll ever get bored with it. I've been a real estate investor for the last 15 years. So I own quite a bit of real estate. But I am transitioning some stuff, right? Like I've started a syndicate. So I'm going to start crowdfunding. I'm going to start, raising money to be able to do deals. Like I'm really into ground leases right now and some other commercial aspects. But I really, really, I'm going to back out of production a little bit. Like I've already proven myself. Check. I can do 40 million a year without a team and with 2 transaction coordinators. Okay, check, done it, been there. So now what I really want to focus on is building, like doing what Tarek and I talked about in the beginning, and that's building the largest organization because, I feel like that people need accountability, and at least with us, if you can tell by talking to me, like I really am about people setting targets, and on a massive level, I try to hold people accountable. And when it gets to the drill down situation, I have coaches that I recommend people to. So we have some really good coaches within our organization that do a really good job on the kind of the minutia. So, I'd like to build out an organization of about 12,000 agents. That's kind of my number because that financially gets me to the goal I want to be. And so that's going to require a little more attention on my part.
Does that get you to number one in eXp?
No.
What's number one?
30, I think. I'm almost sure it's Brent Gove or Rob Flick, and it's 35,000. So they're making about $2 million a month.
Right.
Yeah.
So the journey of real estate is obviously one that can be prolonged because there's so many different individual sections of it.
There is, and I love that.
Yeah, there's so much different. There's so many different things that you can obviously hang out.
I'm sitting there thinking, I got to learn about these auctions now. I got to figure that deal out. Yeah,
that's right. Indeed. Well, I think that the other part of this as well is that continuing education and you being genuinely curious. What are your sources of training? What are your sources of mindset coaching for yourself? I understand that you've got a coach. I understand all of those things, but on your own self-paced perspective, what books, maybe your book, that you can promote and tell people about so that then they can get an understanding of what that'll give them? What other books have really made an influence to your life? What YouTube videos do you watch or podcast, or where do you go to really enhance yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So, who's another person who's on my team that I brought in, very dear friend of mine. Her name's Sharon Lecter, and she was the co-author of Rich Dad Poor Dad with Kiyosaki. She was actually the co-founder of the whole Rich Dad empire. And so, I've been through all the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff. I highly, highly recommend. And of course, from there, once she sold back to Kiyosaki, she then went with the Napoleon. She's one of my very best friends. She went with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, did a lot of stuff, Exit Rich and Think and Grow Rich for Women. So I've majorly consumed her stuff. I love it. I consume Grant stuff. I have for 15 years, about 12 years, 10X, Sell or Be Sold, just really, really strong. So I do Audible books because I'm in the car so much. So I try to do 4 books a month.
Okay.
So I'm kind of all over the map. I'm really in love with Bill O'Reilly, his whole series right now. He's got some really good ones. And so, I listen to financial podcasts, InvestHer and some of those, I follow Inman, right? Like I try to make sure that I understand, like I never want a client to ask me, hey, well, what about this tax break or what about this? And me not know. Right. And so, I consume a lot of content. I don't watch television. I don't waste time on Netflix. Like I am listening to a podcast or listening to a book.
How was the process of writing your own book?
Oh, I've done
it. People either love or hate writing.
I don't love it. And I actually wrote my books, real deal. Then I hired editors and published and all that. But I wrote 2 books. I wrote Crushing Mediocrity, 10 Ways to Rise Above the Status Quo. And then I wrote a book when I was in the auto industry called Cars Her Way. Hated writing both of them. The Crushing Mediocrity was really so that the joke was, me and my co-author, that when we died, she's the top female jet broker in the world. When we die, we don't want people to screw up our eulogy. So here it is in the book. I don't care what anybody else says about me. This is the truth. And then Cars Her Way, I really wrote for female consumers. And that one was just arduous. It was like, trying to get it done. So I don't see myself writing any more books in the near future. That isn't the best way for me to communicate. The way I communicate is I make videos, I do podcasts. I like to speak. So
yeah, no, it's been, well, again, I think that I've taken a lot of energy out of yourself, but there's one final question I've got. Okay, is what was the CEO of Ferrari like? Did you get to meet him?
Oh my God, yes, I love him. His name's Sergio Marchionne. And he was the chairman of Ferrari, Maserati, Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat, Global.
Wow.
Yeah. And I made a bet with the head of Fiat at the time that I said, when my team breaks the world sales record, I want to meet Marchionne. And you guys can find this all out on Google. You can Google Lisa Copeland, Sergio Marchionne. After we did it, he built me my own custom car.
Really?
And yeah, because actually I chose him over George Clooney because Chrysler freaked out so bad when we actually broke the record. They're like, Marchionne can't come. We were just kidding. He's in Italy. And there was a big labor dispute going on and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't give a crap. I made a bet. We did it. And I'm going to meet Marchionne. Either you tell him or I'm going to tell him. And they freaked. So Marchionne came. And he was, and so they tried to offer me George Clooney, which it's all in the YouTube video. And because George Clooney was doing our ads in Italy. And I'm like, I don't want to meet Clooney. I could care less about Clooney. I want to meet Marchione. So when Marchione got to my dealership, he literally opens up his speech, which is on YouTube, and he says, "You chose me over George Clooney." And I'm like, yep.
I think that was that's the video of the guy. Like, yeah, I actually saw a bit. I saw the first part of that actually.
And I did. I chose him because guys and gals, like whoever's listening to this, like figure out the person that will change your life and then figure out what you need to meet them. Of everybody who's been in my long journey, and I've got some pretty high profile people, but Marchione changed my life. He changed my life because he actually showed up. And he was furious with them at Chrysler for trying to skimp on the bet, even though he didn't know about the bet. And he was the one who personally appointed me to the National Dealer Council. Wow. And he took a big liking to me, obviously. So it doesn't hurt that the chairman of the board of the global platform is your biggest fan.
Yeah.
And so he built me my own car, the Lisa Copeland 001. It's on the thing. He painted it pink. He had Ferrari painted pink. It's in a car museum now in Las Vegas. Just because what am I going to do with a pink Fiat? It was an Abarth. But it was a trophy at the time, right? But anyways, so it's on loan to an automotive, a good friend of mine by the name of Josh Tobin. He's the king of cars. He had the reality show King of Cars. It's in his car museum on loan right now. And, anyways, it was just such a time as this. And so, who's the one person? That's my advice I'm going to leave everybody with. Who's the one person that you can meet? And what are you willing to do to meet them that will change your life? Marchione changed my life. Like nobody can ever take that video down off of YouTube of him endorsing me and saying that forget everything else that happened. Lisa is the star, right? Like, when I go out for a job, I'm like, here, watch this video. It's Marchione. Everyone knows who Marchione is. He's since deceased, but what are you willing to do to get known? Grant says best known beats best. And that's advice to the real estate community is that how do you become best known in your market? Because if you become best known, you will be the best realtor out there because you become that top of mind resource.
Well, I think that there's some absolute gems to end the podcast on. Lisa, we really appreciate you joining us and thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.